I'm going to take one joint in this activity, the long jump that you're fixing to see, and just give you an example or a sample of how you would go through analyzing the action. Whenever you're analyzing, you've got to go into tunnel vision. What I mean by that is you've got to rule out all other joints except one specific joint that you're looking at. You look at one joint at a time. And when you're looking at the action taking place at that joint, you have to ask yourself these questions. First, what is the action? And what bone do you look at, or part of a bone do you focus on to tell what that action is? The first action we're going to look at is going to be the knee action. And you look at the lower leg. If, for example, we were looking at the hip joint, we would look at the femur. If we were looking at the shoulder girdle joint, we would look at the scapula. And we're looking to see the direction that these bones are moving, and that determines what the action is. You should know the definition of all the actions: flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and whichever way that bone moves, that's what determines the action. Then, after you've determined the action at the joint you're looking at, you then look at what type of contraction. Remember, if it's an eccentric contraction, the resistance that's being moved, or the weight, is going to go up if it's a concentric contraction. If it's an eccentric contraction, that resistance is going to be moved down. So that's how you're going to tell what type of contraction. And you've got to know that first in your thinking to determine what muscle is responsible. So even on the test, if you're not asked that specific question of what is the contraction, you still in your mind and in your analysis have to go through that and determine what the contraction is. Then, after you've determined what the contraction is, then if it's concentric, you look at the muscles that cause the action at that joint. And that would be a muscle whose primary action is the action you determined. Then you would go from there to naming that muscle. So 3 is you name the muscle responsible after you know what the contraction is. And then 4, I might ask you, what is a muscle group? So if I said, what is a muscle group, then you would say it might be knee extensors or knee flexors. But that's very briefly how you break down your analysis. Now let's take this to one point further and look at a specific joint in this activity of the long jump. Okay, I'm going to slow the action down, and we're going to have this long jump begin. Let me see if I can get it to the point where I want you to. Okay, here we come. She's going to come up here. I'm going to slow that action down, and I've got her where I want you to start at point at point A, right here. Now we're looking at the knee joint. So this is point A. So you're going to take it from point A to point B. So this is point A. Now I'm going to take you to point B, and you are going to determine the action and analyze this action by going through those steps we did a while ago. So I'm going to have the video going again. Now we're going to back up. Clear that off my screen. We're going to back up. So this was this was point A. You're looking at the knee joint, and we're going to go to point B. This is point B. So we're at the knee joint, so what bone do we watch? We're watching the lower leg. And so when we watch the lower leg, what is the action? So that action from point A to point B was extension. I'm going to abbreviate here to save room, so things like that right there don't happen. Okay, so that was extension. So then let's look. We said that was the action, was extension. So then we're going to say, what was the contraction? Remember, the contraction, if it's concentric, the resistance or the weight, which in this case is the lower leg, moves up if it's concentric. If the weight or the resistance, in this case the lower leg, moves down, then it is eccentric. And in this case, we can see that the leg is moving up. So that action would be concentric. So going from point A to point B, the action is extension. We said it was concentric, so a muscle has to be causing it. So we look at the primary actions of the muscles. What is a primary action of a muscle at the knee joint that is extension? That could be one of the quadriceps. And if you're asked to give a specific muscle, don't say quadriceps because that's 4 muscles. You give a specific muscle. If I asked for a muscle group, you would say quadriceps, or you would say knee joint extensors. In this case, I'm asking for a specific muscle, so I'll say the vastus medialis. Its primary action is concentric. There are others that are primary action is extension at the knee, which would also be correct. So you could list any of those, but be sure if I ask for one muscle, you give one muscle, and we're always looking at the primary action. You don't have to worry about secondary actions. As I've said all semester, that is to simplify this process for you. So don't just look at the primary actions. So that's how you analyze, and you would go on. If, say, the next question on the exam was about the hip joint, then you just focus on the hip joint. If the next action is the shoulder joint, you just focus on the shoulder joint. You may have to watch the video over and over, but you just have tunnel vision. Don't be overwhelmed with the whole video. You're just focusing on one joint at a time. Okay, I hope this helped a little bit. Good luck on the final exam, and be sure and read the review for the final exam very well. Study those study guides.